Have you ever felt like you were meant for something greater, something beyond your current life? That deep inner call that won't let go, even though you can't quite understand what it means. Maybe it's that feeling you get when you look around at the life you're living and think, is this all there is? Or perhaps it's that nagging thought, deep down, that there's something bigger, something more, waiting for you to discover it. For years you might have pushed this feeling aside, telling yourself it's just a phase, a fleeting thought. But now, it's louder. It's growing stronger, more persistent. It's as if something is calling you, but you don't know what it is or where to start. And in your heart, you know that you've been living only a fraction of the life you were meant to lead. Meet Alex. Alex is just like you. For years, they lived a life that many would call ordinary. A job that felt like it was going through the motions, a routine that offered comfort but never fulfillment. Friends and family who loved them, but who never quite understood that deep longing they couldn't shake. On the surface, Alex's life looked fine, maybe even ideal, but inside, something was missing. The spark, the fire that once fueled them seemed to have dimmed, leaving only the faintest flicker of hope. Alex tried to ignore it, as most of us do. They buried themselves in work, in distractions, in day-to-day life. But no matter how much they tried to push it away, the call only grew stronger. It was as though something was stirring deep within, urging them to step outside the box, to break free from the life they'd built. Alex didn't know what it was, but they could feel it. Something was waiting for them, something divine. They started to notice signs, little synchronicities, moments of serendipity that they couldn't explain, an unexpected encounter, a song playing at the right moment, a dream so vivid it felt real. But still, Alex wasn't ready to listen. It was too strange, too out of reach. They couldn't let go of the life they knew, even if it wasn't the life they were meant for. But slowly, as the universe kept speaking louder and louder, Alex began to listen. And that's when things started to change. This is where our journey begins. Just like Alex, you're about to embark on a path that will lead you to your true calling. A path of awakening, of self-discovery, and of embracing the life you are truly meant to live. It's a journey that will challenge you, awaken parts of you that have been dormant for years, and lead you to a place of true divine purpose. But to walk this path, you need to be open to the signs, open to the whispers of your soul, and most importantly, open to the truth that you are more than what you see. You were chosen for something greater, and it's time to discover what that is. If you're ready to embark on this journey of awakening and discover your true divine purpose, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stay with us, chosen one. The best is yet to come. For years, Mark lived a life that many would envy. He had a stable job in finance, a comfortable apartment in the city, and a circle of friends who always supported him. On the outside, his life seemed perfectly put together. But on the inside, Mark felt an increasing sense of emptiness, as though something was missing, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. Each day, he would wake up to the sound of his alarm clock, drag himself out of bed, and follow the same routine. Grab coffee, hop on the train, sit at his desk, and shuffle through the endless emails. It was as if he was stuck on autopilot. Day after day, Mark performed his tasks efficiently, going through the motions like a well-oiled machine. But deep down, he was growing tired. Tired of the same old thing, tired of feeling like life was passing him by. It wasn't that he hated his job, far from it. He was good at what he did. In fact, his career was flourishing. But something gnawed at him, an unshakable feeling that no matter how well things seemed to be going on the surface, something was fundamentally off. He began to wonder if there was more to life than this endless cycle of work, sleep, repeat. What was his true purpose? Was he truly living in alignment with what he was meant to do? Or was he merely going through the motions because it was expected of him? Mark couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. It wasn't just a passing thought that could be swept under the rug. It was there, every single day. It grew louder with each passing week, each passing month. His work didn't excite him the way it once did. His relationships, though fulfilling, felt like they were stuck in a pattern that no longer brought him joy. He felt disconnected from himself and from those around him. The weight of this sense of being off track was starting to wear on him. He felt like he was trapped in a life that wasn't his own, one that had been built by societal expectations, not by his own desires or dreams. He found himself questioning his decisions. Was this really the path he was meant to take? Was this the life he envisioned for himself when he was younger, full of dreams and aspirations? Had he taken the wrong turn somewhere along the way? As the questions flooded his mind, Mark started to feel lost. There was a part of him that knew deep down that he wasn't living his truth, that he was out of sync with his real purpose. But the path forward was unclear, and he wasn't sure where to begin. One evening, after another draining day at work, Mark found himself walking home through the park near his apartment. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the trees and the pathway. For a brief moment, he stopped in his tracks and took a deep breath, allowing himself to take in the beauty around him. It had been a long time since he had stopped to truly notice the world around him. He had been so consumed by the grind of daily life that he had forgotten how to appreciate the simple things. As he stood there, something strange happened. It was as though time slowed down. He felt a sudden, inexplicable sense of peace, as if the weight that had been pressing on his chest was momentarily lifted. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough to make Mark feel something he hadn't felt in a long time, a connection to something greater than himself. It wasn't a thought or an idea, but a feeling, a sense of knowing that he couldn't quite explain. For a moment, Mark wondered if this was a sign, some sort of divine nudge, telling him that he was on the right path. But then, almost as quickly as the feeling had come, doubt crept in. He pushed it aside, convincing himself that it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. He didn't have time for moments of clarity like this. There were bills to pay, responsibilities to meet, and deadlines to hit. His life was too busy to entertain these thoughts, too practical to consider that there might be a higher purpose waiting for him. But the feeling lingered. Over the next few days, Mark began to notice other strange things happening around him. A friend would randomly text him a message about spiritual awakening, or he would hear a song that seemed to speak directly to his soul. He'd stumble upon books or articles that seemed to echo the very questions he had been asking himself. It wasn't just coincidence. It was as if the universe was trying to get his attention. Mark couldn't shake the growing sense that he was being called towards something. The signs were everywhere, and yet he continued to resist. He was afraid of what it might mean, of what would happen if he truly opened himself up to this deeper calling. What if he wasn't ready? What if it was all just too much to handle? The truth was, Mark was scared. Scared of change, scared of the unknown. He had spent so many years building a life based on certainty, on the things that he could control. The idea of stepping into the unknown, of listening to that quiet voice deep within, felt like a huge leap of faith, one that he wasn't sure he was ready to take. But despite his fear, Mark couldn't ignore the pull anymore. Deep inside, he knew that this was the beginning of something bigger than himself. He couldn't keep running from the call to discover his true purpose. The universe had been sending him signs for a reason, and it was time to listen. If you're feeling lost or disconnected, remember, you're not alone. Like this video to show you're ready to embrace your purpose, and hit subscribe to stay connected to your journey. You are being called too, chosen one. The path is waiting for you. The days that followed Mark's encounter in the park seemed to pass by in a blur. The weight of his daily routine began to feel heavier than ever, but the faint voice he had heard in his heart that evening lingered, refusing to be ignored. At first, he tried to push it aside, telling himself it was just a moment of distraction, a fleeting thought brought on by the stress of work and the constant hustle of his life. But as the days turned into weeks, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something greater was at play. It was a typical Thursday evening when it happened. Mark had just returned home from another long day at work, the weight of his tasks hanging over him like a dark cloud. As he sat down at his kitchen table, preparing a simple meal, his mind kept drifting back to the peaceful moment in the park. He couldn't forget how it had felt. The sense of connection to something beyond himself, the sudden clarity that had flooded his soul. He knew he couldn't ignore it forever. The question was, what was he supposed to do with it? That night, as he lay in bed, Mark's thoughts became a tangled mess of confusion and doubt. He tossed and turned, unable to sleep, his mind racing with questions. Was it just my imagination? He wondered. What if it was just a fleeting moment and there's nothing more to it? What if I'm just making this up? But deep down, a quiet voice within him kept whispering, "Listen, you're being called for something more." The next morning, Mark woke up feeling unusually tired. He had barely slept, his mind too preoccupied with the growing sense of something waiting for him. He dragged himself out of bed, trying to push the feelings aside once again. But as he walked into the kitchen to make his morning coffee, something unexpected happened. The phone rang, jolting him out of his thoughts. It was an unfamiliar number. Hesitant, Mark answered. "Hello?" "Mark, it's Sarah," came the voice on the other end. "I know we haven't talked in a while, but I just felt like I needed to call you. I don't know why, but I kept thinking about you yesterday. I think you're going through something big. I don't want to scare you, but I just wanted to remind you that you're not alone. You've got a bigger purpose. You're meant for something amazing." Mark stood frozen, the words echoing in his mind. He could barely process what he was hearing. He hadn't spoken to Sarah in months. How could she know what was going on in his life? His mouth went dry as he struggled to find words. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "I've been feeling something, but I'm not sure what it is. It's like I'm stuck." Sarah's voice softened, filled with an unmistakable warmth. "I know it's hard, but I just wanted to remind you, you don't have to figure it all out right now. You're being guided. The universe is speaking to you. Trust that." The phone call ended shortly after that, and Mark stood there in stunned silence. His heart was pounding in his chest. What had just happened? It felt like a sign, like a message sent directly to him. But how could Sarah have known? How could she have known exactly what he was going through, what he was feeling deep inside? As the day wore on, Mark couldn't stop thinking about the call. It was as if the universe had reached out to him, in a way he couldn't deny. Sarah's words haunted him, but in a way, they brought him comfort too. Maybe there was something more to this feeling, something bigger than he had realized. That evening, as Mark sat alone in his apartment, he took a deep breath and closed his eyes, letting his mind wander. He could still hear Sarah's voice echoing in his head, but something else was beginning to stir inside him. It wasn't just the words of his friend. It was the feeling that had been growing inside him for weeks. The feeling that there was a purpose, a calling, a voice that he had yet to fully listen to. Suddenly, as though a veil had been lifted, Mark felt it. The voice. Not literal, not spoken out loud, but a deep, resounding feeling that seemed to come from the very core of his being. It wasn't a voice that came from outside. It was a voice from within. It felt like his soul was reaching out to him, urging him to step forward and embrace something greater than the life he had been living. The message was clear. It's time to listen. It's time to step out of your comfort zone and trust that you are being guided. Your true purpose is waiting for you. The voice didn't sound like anything Mark had ever heard before, but it felt undeniable. It wasn't a voice of fear or doubt. It was a voice of calm assurance, as if it knew that Mark was ready to hear the truth. But despite the clarity, Mark found himself hesitating. What if I'm wrong, he thought. What if this is just a fleeting thought, a moment of weakness and I'm just imagining things? He felt the familiar resistance rise up within him. Fear gripped his heart. Stepping into the unknown was terrifying. What would it mean for his career, for his relationships, for the life he had worked so hard to build? For a moment, Mark tried to push the voice away. He told himself that it was just a phase, a passing feeling. But deep down, he knew the truth. He couldn't ignore it anymore. The voice, the call, the signs, they were all pointing him in one direction. And he knew that if he didn't listen now, he might never get another chance. Mark sat in silence for a long time, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. It wasn't easy. It never is. But in that quiet moment, he made a choice. He decided to trust the voice, to trust the calling that had been growing stronger with each passing day. He didn't know where it would lead him, but he knew one thing for sure. It was time to step forward. Do you hear that voice too, calling you towards something greater? Are you ready to stop ignoring the signs and start listening to your soul? Hit like and subscribe if you're ready to take that first step and embrace your true divine purpose. The journey is waiting for you, chosen one. It's time to listen, and it's time to act. Mark's heart raced as the weight of his decision settled over him. The voice inside him, though subtle, had become louder and more insistent. He couldn't deny it any longer. The signs were everywhere, and they seemed to be speaking directly to him. Yet, even with all the signs pointing in the same direction, Mark couldn't shake the unease that clung to him. The idea of embracing this new path, of truly stepping into the unknown, filled him with both a deep sense of possibility and a paralyzing fear. The first sign came just a few days after Mark made the decision to trust his inner voice. He was walking down the street after work when he overheard a conversation between two strangers outside a cafe. One of them, a woman he'd never met before, was talking about the exact doubts and fears that had been consuming Mark. "I've been thinking about changing careers," the woman said, "but I'm scared. What if I fail? What if I walk away from everything I've built and regret it?" Mark froze in his tracks. It felt like the universe was speaking directly to him, as if that woman's words were his own. He lingered for a moment, hesitant to move, before shaking himself out of his daze and continuing on his way. But the conversation stayed with him, the same words he had been wrestling with. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, the fear of making a choice that might lead to regret echoed in his mind. He couldn't help but feel like it was a nudge, a reminder that the path ahead would be filled with fear. But that didn't mean it wasn't worth walking. The second sign came the following week. Mark's old friend Sarah, the one who had called him out of the blue weeks earlier, reached out again. This time, their conversation took an unexpected turn. Sarah spoke about her own journey of transformation, the personal growth she had experienced after taking a leap of faith and following her own calling. "It wasn't easy," she confessed, "but I had to trust that what I was feeling deep inside was real. I had to let go of the life I knew, the security I had, and take a chance on something I couldn't fully explain." As she spoke, Mark felt a wave of recognition wash over him. It was as though Sarah was telling his story, only she had already taken the leap, and he was still standing at the edge, too afraid to jump. He had always admired Sarah for her courage, but now her words resonated with him on a deeper level. Still, despite the clarity in his heart, Mark hesitated. The fear, the uncertainty, the unknown, all of it held him back. How could he possibly walk away from the life he'd built? The career that was stable, the relationships he had, the comfort and routine that had kept him grounded for so long. What if it all fell apart? What if he failed? The fear of failure was perhaps the greatest barrier. Mark had always prided himself on being practical, logical, and careful. He had built his life on certainty, on making calculated decisions that guaranteed a certain level of success. The idea of letting go of all that, of stepping into a life driven by intuition and faith rather than logic, felt reckless. But as the days passed, the pull to listen to the voice inside him grew stronger. It wasn't just an internal voice anymore. It was as if everything around him, the people, the events, the signs, were calling him to take action, to move forward, to trust that the path ahead was not only worth the risk, but essential to his soul's evolution. One evening, Mark found himself sitting on the couch in his apartment, his mind racing. He replayed every conversation, every sign, every moment that had led him to this point. And as he sat there, the weight of his indecision finally became too much to bear. His heart knew the truth before his mind could catch up. It was time. Time to stop waiting for the perfect moment. Time to stop listening to the doubts, and time to take the first step. Mark stood up abruptly, pacing the room as the realization hit him. He couldn't keep living in this state of limbo. He couldn't keep waiting for the fear to go away, because it never would. The fear was a natural part of the process. It was a sign that he was on the right path, that he was about to do something big, something that would change the course of his life forever. But the fear couldn't control him anymore. He had to let go and trust in the journey. The moment of decision had arrived, and with it, a rush of clarity and purpose flooded his being. Mark made a promise to himself. He would no longer let fear dictate his future. He would take the leap, even if he didn't have all the answers. He would embrace the unknown, trust the voice of his soul, and step into the divine purpose that was waiting for him. Mark's decision was not an easy one. It was a moment of profound vulnerability, of facing the deepest fears he had carried for so long. But it was also a moment of liberation. By choosing to listen to the voice that had been calling him all along, Mark was finally reclaiming his life. The next morning, Mark woke up with a sense of calm he hadn't felt in years. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't know exactly where this path would lead. But for the first time, he felt like he was on the right track, like he was finally moving in the direction of his true self. As Mark stepped into this new chapter of his life, he knew that there would be challenges ahead. There would be moments of doubt, moments of fear, and moments when he would want to turn back. But he also knew that the voice of his soul would guide him, that the signs would continue to appear, and that he had the strength to keep going, no matter what. And now, as you read Mark's story, I ask you, do you hear that voice too? The voice calling you towards something greater? Are you ready to take that first step and trust in your divine purpose? If so, like this video to show that you are ready to embrace the path that's calling you, and subscribe to stay connected to your own journey of awakening. The road to your true self begins now. Mark had made the decision. There was no turning back. After weeks of doubt, he had finally chosen to trust the voice that had been calling him towards something greater. And now, as he took his first steps down this new path, the road ahead was both exhilarating and terrifying. The first change was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Mark felt it in every fibre of his being. It started with his morning routine. He had always been someone who prided himself on being disciplined, waking up early, getting to work on time, keeping a strict schedule. But now, he began to feel the need to break free from that rigid structure. He started waking up earlier, not because he had to, but because he felt drawn to spend those extra hours meditating, reflecting, and simply being present in the moment. The mornings were no longer just about rushing through the day. They became a sacred time for Mark to connect with himself, to listen to the voice within, and to set his intentions for the day ahead. With this change came another. Mark began to look at his job differently. His career, which once seemed like the ultimate goal, now felt like a cage. He had spent years working in a job that paid well and offered security, but deep down, he knew it was not what he was meant to do. He had sacrificed his passions, his dreams, his creativity for the sake of stability and success. But now, as he listened to the voice of his soul, he realized that this path wasn't aligned with who he truly was. He knew that it was time to let go. It wasn't an easy decision. The fear of uncertainty, of walking away from the life he had built, gripped him. But as he thought about the future, he knew that the price of staying in a life that wasn't his was far greater than the risk of embracing the unknown. Mark began the process of slowly transitioning out of his job. He didn't have a clear plan at first, and he certainly didn't have the financial security he had once relied on. But he trusted that this was part of the journey. Every decision, every step forward, felt like a leap of faith. And each step, no matter how small, was a declaration that he was finally ready to embrace his true purpose. But change didn't just stop with his job. Mark also began to take a hard look at the relationships in his life. He realized that for far too long, he had surrounded himself with people who didn't truly support the person he was becoming. Some of his friendships were rooted in shared habits that no longer served him, while others were built on the comfort of the past, not the promise of the future. He had spent years in relationships that felt stagnant, and as he grew, he began to see that many of these connections were no longer aligned with his soul's path. Ending these relationships was painful. It wasn't easy to walk away from people he had known for years, people who had once meant so much to him. But as he listened to the voice within, he realized that holding on to these relationships out of obligation or fear of being alone would only hold him back. He began to distance himself from people who drained his energy or kept him stuck in old patterns. And while he mourned the loss of these connections, he knew that letting go was necessary for his growth. As Mark continued on this path of transformation, the challenges seemed to intensify. The fear of uncertainty didn't disappear. In fact, it often felt overwhelming. There were days when Mark doubted his decision, days when the weight of his choices felt unbearable. He questioned if he was being foolish, if he was making a mistake by walking away from the life he had known. But with each challenge, he found strength he never knew he had. He learned to trust in the process, to believe that every obstacle was a lesson, every difficulty an opportunity to grow. The more he embraced the discomfort of change, the more he saw how much it was pushing him to step into his true self. Each time he faced a new challenge, whether it was finding a new job, dealing with the fallout from letting go of old relationships, or simply confronting his own self-doubt, he felt himself growing stronger, more confident in his decisions, and more aligned with his soul's purpose. It wasn't easy. Growth never is. There were moments when Mark wanted to give up, moments when he questioned if he was really chosen for this path. But those moments became fewer and farther between. With each passing day, he began to see more clearly the purpose behind everything he had been through. He saw how the struggles had shaped him, how the pain had opened his heart, and how the uncertainty had pushed him to embrace his true self. Then, one day, as Mark sat quietly by the window, reflecting on his journey, he had a revelation. It was as if everything suddenly clicked into place. He realized that the voice he had been hearing all along, the one that had been calling him towards something greater, wasn't just a random thought or a passing idea. It was his soul speaking to him, guiding him toward his true divine purpose. For the first time, Mark understood why he had been chosen. It wasn't because he was special or unique. It was because he had the courage to listen. He had the courage to trust in the voice of his soul, even when it didn't make sense, even when it was terrifying. He had been chosen not for what he had done, but for what he was willing to do. To let go of the life that no longer served him, to embrace the unknown, and to trust that the universe would guide him toward his true purpose. Mark knew that the journey wasn't over. There were still challenges ahead, still obstacles to overcome, but he also knew that he was on the right path now, that he was living in alignment with his true purpose. He felt a deep sense of peace, and knowing that everything was unfolding exactly as it was meant to. And he couldn't wait to see where this journey would take him next. Your transformation is unfolding right now. Like this video if you're feeling the shift within you, and subscribe to continue walking this path with us. You too are on a journey of growth, and your true purpose is waiting for you. Trust the process, embrace the change, and step into the person you were always meant to be. The path ahead is calling you. Don't let fear hold you back. Mark's journey had been nothing short of transformative. Each step, each challenge, had brought him closer to the person he was meant to be. But it was in the quiet moments, the moments when the noise of the world faded away, that he began to feel something truly powerful stirring within him. It was as if the universe was reaching out, pulling him deeper into a connection that he had never fully understood until now. At first, it was subtle, a feeling of calm that washed over him when he meditated in the mornings, the peace that came with just being present in the moment. He felt, more and more, that he wasn't alone in his journey. There was a guiding force, something greater than himself, that was leading him forward. It wasn't a voice, like the one that had first called him to action, but a deep sense of knowing, a sense that the path he was walking was not one he was walking alone. It was as if a higher power, something divine, was with him, nudging him, showing him the way. In those early mornings of stillness, Mark began to notice small signs that seemed too significant to ignore. A butterfly landing on his windowsill at just the right moment, the perfect book falling into his lap at the bookstore, the way a song on the radio seemed to speak directly to his heart. These weren't just coincidences, they were synchronicities. Events that, when viewed from the right perspective, felt like the universe was affirming that he was on the right path. But it wasn't just the external signs that spoke to him. Mark began to feel a deep inner alignment, as if his soul was waking up to its true purpose. The nagging doubts that had plagued him in the past, the questions about whether he was truly on the right path, began to fade. The more he connected with the divine, the clearer his purpose became. He wasn't just here to live a life of comfort and stability. He was here to serve, to make an impact, to use his gifts and talents to help others. In the stillness of those moments, Mark understood something profound. His purpose wasn't just about him. It wasn't about finding success or wealth or recognition. It was about contributing to the greater good, about being a part of something much bigger than himself. The universe had given him a gift, the gift of his unique perspective, his strengths, his experiences, and it was his duty to share those gifts with the world. The clarity Mark felt wasn't immediate, and it didn't come without its struggles. There were days when he still doubted the path he was on. The fear of failure, of making the wrong choices, continued to linger. But the more he tuned into this divine connection, the more he trusted that he was exactly where he was meant to be. He wasn't just walking through life on autopilot anymore. He was walking with purpose, with guidance, with the support of something greater than himself. But the true test of his faith came sooner than Mark had expected. One afternoon, as Mark was reflecting on everything he had learned so far, he received a phone call that would shake him to his core. His company, the one he had worked at for years, was letting him go. The news came out of nowhere. There had been no warning, no sign that this was coming. Mark sat there stunned, as his world seemed to come crushing down around him. For a moment, he felt lost again. The fear, the doubt, the uncertainty that he had worked so hard to overcome came rushing back in full force. What would he do now? How would he pay the bills? What if this was a sign that he had made the wrong choice, that he was supposed to stay in the safe, predictable life he had left behind? The familiar fear of failure crept in, and Mark found himself questioning everything. In that moment of doubt, he felt the divine connection he had been building over the past few months. It wasn't a loud voice or a sudden revelation, but a quiet knowing deep within him. The same voice that had been guiding him all along spoke again, this time with more clarity than ever before. This is your test. This is the moment when you have to trust. You are being led to something greater, and this setback is only part of the process. Don't give in to fear. Mark took a deep breath. He could feel the pull of fear, the temptation to fall back into the comfort of what he had known, but he also knew that this was a test of faith, a test of everything he had learned. He could either let fear control him, or he could trust in the guidance he had been receiving. In that moment, Mark made the decision to trust. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that this was part of the journey. He knew that the divine connection he had been cultivating would carry him through. The weeks that followed were filled with uncertainty. Mark wasn't sure what was next, and the weight of not knowing was heavy. But as he stayed connected to the divine, he began to notice new opportunities. He began to meet people who shared his passion for personal growth and spiritual development. He found himself being drawn to new projects and endeavors that aligned with his purpose. And slowly, he started to realize that this job loss wasn't the end of his story. It was simply a stepping stone towards something greater. The test of faith had been difficult, but it had also been a profound lesson. Mark learned that true faith wasn't about knowing exactly what the future held. It was about trusting the process, even when things seemed unclear. It was about listening to the voice within, even when it felt like the world around him was falling apart. And most importantly, it was about knowing that he wasn't alone in this journey, that the divine was always with him, guiding him toward his true purpose. Mark's journey was far from over, and he knew there would be more challenges ahead. But he also knew that as long as he stayed connected to his divine guidance, he would continue to move forward. He was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. He had faith that he was being led to exactly where he was meant to be. Do you feel that divine connection within you? It's time to embrace it fully. Like and subscribe as we continue to uncover your divine purpose. The path ahead is calling, chosen one. Trust in it and step boldly into your future. As the weeks passed, Mark's life began to shift in ways he never imagined. The fears that had once held him back, the doubts that had haunted him, all seemed to fade as he embraced his divine purpose. The loss of his job, while initially terrifying, had become a catalyst for transformation. It had forced him to let go of what no longer served him and step into the unknown, where his true calling awaited. The path had not been easy. There were moments when Mark felt overwhelmed by the uncertainty of it all. He still didn't have all the answers, and the weight of the responsibility he now felt could be daunting. but there was a deep sense of peace that came with knowing he was finally on the right path. The divine connection he had been cultivating over the past few months was no longer just a fleeting sensation. It was a constant presence, a guiding force that led him every step of the way. For the first time, Mark truly understood the significance of the journey he was on. It wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't just about finding happiness, success, or fulfillment for himself. It was about something much bigger, something that would impact the lives of others. He had been chosen for this path, and with that choice came great responsibility. Mark had always prided himself on being independent, on carving his own path. But now, as he fully stepped into his role as the chosen one, he realized that this wasn't just about him. This was about the people he would touch, the lives he would inspire, and the difference he could make in the world. His purpose was not just his own personal fulfillment, it was to serve others, to share his journey and the lessons he had learned, and to help others find their own path to transformation. At first, Mark's role seemed unclear. How could he, a person who had spent so much of his life lost in doubt, now become a beacon for others? But as he continued to trust in the guidance of his soul, the path forward became more evident. He began to feel a pull toward teaching, toward sharing the wisdom and insights he had gained through his own struggles. His voice, once uncertain, now felt powerful. He knew that he had something important to share, not because he was special or unique, but because he had lived through the very struggles others were facing. Mark began to reach out to others who were on similar journeys of self-discovery and transformation. He connected with people who felt lost, people who were questioning their purpose, people who, like him, had been waiting for a sign, for a nudge in the right direction. His story resonated with them. They saw themselves in Mark, in his struggles, his doubts, and his ultimate awakening. And as he shared his experiences, as he opened up about the challenges he had faced, Mark began to inspire others in ways he never imagined. As he continued to walk the path he had been called to, Mark saw the impact his journey was having on those around him. His friends, his family, even strangers who heard his story, began to feel the ripple effects of his transformation. It wasn't just his life that was changing, it was the lives of those he encountered. His courage to step into his true purpose had sparked something in others. They began to believe that they too had a divine purpose. They began to see that they could overcome their own doubts and fears and step into the roles they were meant to play. One evening, as Mark sat at a cafe, he had an unexpected encounter. A woman, whom he had never met before, approached him hesitantly. She looked at him for a moment, as if trying to find the right words. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know you, but I've been following your journey. Your story. It's given me the strength to make a change in my life. I've been stuck in my job, in a relationship that no longer serves me. And hearing what you've gone through has made me realize that I have the power to choose differently." Mark felt a lump form in his throat as he listened to her. In that moment, he realized that this was what his journey had all been about. It wasn't just for him, it was for people like her, people who needed to hear the message that transformation was possible, that they, too, could step into their true divine purpose. And Mark knew that he had to continue walking this path, even when it was hard, because his story was helping others awaken to their own. As Mark's story spread, so did the realization that the power of his transformation lay not just in his own growth, but in his ability to help others find their way as well. He began to mentor others, offering guidance, support, and encouragement as they too stepped into their roles as the chosen ones of their own lives. It wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It was about living authentically, about following the call of the soul, and about helping others do the same. The more Mark embraced his role, the more he felt connected to the divine. The voice within him became stronger, more distinct. It wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was a knowing, a deep understanding that he was living in alignment with his true purpose. And as he continued to embrace this purpose, Mark saw his impact grow. He wasn't just touching lives with his story, he was creating a movement. People were beginning to believe in their own potential, in their own power to transform their lives, to embrace their divine purpose. Mark realized that this was what it meant to be chosen. It wasn't about being special or extraordinary. It was about living authentically, about listening to the call of the soul, and about helping others do the same. The moment he embraced his role as the chosen one wasn't the end of his journey, it was just the beginning. Now, Mark was living his truth, fully, completely, and without hesitation. He was no longer the person he had been before. He had stepped into his power, embraced his divine purpose, and was making an impact on the world. And as he looked back on everything he had been through, he couldn't help but smile. Every challenge, every fear, every moment of doubt had brought him here, to this place of deep fulfillment and purpose. And now, he knew that his work was just beginning. You too have a role to play in this world. Your journey, just like Mark's, is waiting to unfold. You were chosen for a reason. It's time to embrace your true divine purpose. Like and subscribe if you're ready to step into your true divine power and live the life you were meant to live. Your transformation starts now. The moment Mark had been preparing for had finally arrived. As he stood at the edge of this new chapter in his life, he could feel the weight of everything he had been through pressing on his shoulders. The months of growth, the leaps of faith, the challenges, and the transformations. All of it had led him to this point. But even with everything he had learned, Mark knew that the true test of his faith was still ahead of him. It wasn't just about embracing his purpose anymore. It wasn't just about trusting the voice inside him or following the signs. Mark had come a long way, but this final test would push him in ways he couldn't anticipate. It was the test of trust, of fully surrendering to the divine plan, even when it didn't make sense, even when it seemed impossible. The opportunity that came to him was unexpected, a job offer that seemed perfect in every way. The pay was better than anything he had ever imagined. The position was exactly what he had dreamed of, and the opportunity to work with like-minded individuals was enticing. On the surface, it seemed like the kind of offer that could solve all his problems. But deep down, Mark knew that this job wasn't aligned with his purpose. It wasn't what his soul was calling him to do. The moment he received the offer, he felt the voice inside him, the divine connection he had been nurturing, whispering that this was not the path for him. It was the ultimate test. The offer was tempting. The security, the comfort, the success, all of it seemed so appealing. But Mark had already learned that true fulfillment didn't come from the external world. It came from within, from living authentically, from following the call of his soul, no matter how challenging it might be. This was the test that would prove if he was truly ready to embody his purpose. Mark spent days grappling with the decision. He consulted his inner voice, meditated, and prayed. The fear of stepping away from the job offer, of turning down such a stable and prosperous opportunity, felt almost overwhelming. But every time he tuned into the voice inside him, the answer was clear. This was not his path. He wasn't meant to live a life of comfort and security. He was meant to do something greater, something that required risk, trust, and courage. In that moment, Mark made the decision to decline the job offer. It wasn't easy, and the doubts still lingered in the back of his mind. But when he made that choice, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It was as though he had passed the test, not by choosing the right path outwardly, but by choosing to honor his soul's calling, even when it didn't make sense. He had trusted the divine guidance he had been receiving and had stepped fully into the role of the chosen one. After that decision, Mark's transformation was complete. The external world didn't change overnight. There were still challenges, still moments of uncertainty, but internally, Mark felt a sense of peace that he had never experienced before. He was no longer chasing external validation or success. He was living in alignment with his true self, and for the first time, he felt that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He had passed the final test, the test of trusting himself, trusting his soul's purpose, and trusting the divine plan. It was in the aftermath of this decision that Mark began to see the fruits of his labor. As he fully embraced his role, he began to connect with others in profound ways. People were drawn to him, to his authenticity, to the way he had transformed his life. He started sharing his journey more openly, not as a way to boast or to seek recognition, but as a way to inspire others to follow their own paths, to trust their own divine callings. Mark's story wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the people he met along the way, the lives he touched, and the impact he was beginning to make in the world. He saw the ripple effect of his transformation, how his decision to live authentically, to trust in his purpose, was inspiring others to do the same. His story had become a beacon for others who were struggling with their own doubts, fears, and uncertainties. Through his example, they saw that it was possible to live a life of purpose, to follow the voice of the soul, and to trust that everything would unfold exactly as it was meant to. Mark began to mentor others, to guide them on their own journeys of transformation. He shared the lessons he had learned, that the path of purpose is not always easy, but it is always worth it. He taught them that the true test is not in avoiding the challenges, but in embracing them, in trusting that every obstacle is an opportunity for growth. He helped them understand that the divine plan is always unfolding, even when it doesn't look the way we expect. Mark's legacy was not in the accolades or the external successes he could claim. It was in the lives he touched, in the people he inspired, in the seeds of change he planted in others. As he reflected on how far he had come, he realized that the true impact of his journey had not been in the physical achievements, but in the spiritual growth he had experienced and the transformation he had inspired in those around him. He thought about the days when he had felt lost, when he had wondered if there was something more to life. He thought about the moments of fear, the times when he doubted himself, when he questioned if he was making the right choices. But now, standing in the fullness of his purpose, he could see the divine plan unfolding before him. Every step had led him here, to this moment of clarity, to this understanding that his life was meant to be a vessel for something greater. As Mark stood on the precipice of this new chapter, he knew that his journey was not over. There would always be more to learn, more to discover, and more to give. But for the first time, he felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Chosen one, your journey is just beginning. Like this video and subscribe for more empowering messages, and remember, you are never alone in your purpose. The path to your true self is unfolding right before you. Trust it, embrace it, and know that you, too, have a role to play in this world. Mark's journey has been one of profound transformation. He started as someone who felt lost, disconnected from his true purpose, unsure of where he was headed or what he was meant to do. His life was filled with uncertainty, and he often wondered if he would ever find the direction he was searching for. But what Mark didn't realize at the time was that the struggle, the doubt, and the fear were all part of his journey, part of the process of awakening to his true divine purpose. In the beginning, Mark was like many of us, living a life that was comfortable, but not fully aligned with his soul's calling. He had the career, the friends, the stability, but something was missing. The voice inside him, the quiet, persistent voice that whispered of something greater, was there, but Mark didn't know how to listen. It wasn't until he faced the discomfort of change, the fear of stepping into the unknown, that he began to truly hear that voice. It wasn't until he let go of the life he thought he wanted that he began to uncover the life he was truly meant to live. As Mark embraced change, he faced his fears head-on. He let go of the job that no longer served him, the relationships that kept him stuck, and the comfort that kept him from growing. He took the leap, trusting in the signs he was receiving, trusting in the divine connection he had nurtured. The more he stepped into his purpose, the more he realized that this wasn't just about him. It was about the people he was meant to impact, the lives he was meant to touch. His journey became a beacon for others, and in living his truth, he helped others do the same. Mark's path wasn't easy. He faced moments of doubt, of questioning whether he was truly on the right path. But with each challenge, he grew stronger. With each trial, he learned more about himself, about his mission, and about the power of trust. And when the ultimate test came, the moment where he had to choose between security and following his soul's calling, Mark passed. He chose to trust in the divine guidance he had been receiving, even when it didn't make sense. And in doing so, he fully embraced his divine purpose. Now, standing at the end of this chapter of his journey, Mark knows that his work is just beginning. His transformation is not an end, but a new beginning. He has stepped into his role as the chosen one, embracing his true purpose and the responsibilities that come with it. And as he continues to walk this path, he knows that he is not alone. The divine connection he has cultivated will guide him, and he will continue to grow, learn, and inspire others to do the same. Mark's story is a reminder to all of us that the path to our true purpose isn't always clear, and it isn't always easy, but it is worth it. Every step of the journey, every challenge, every moment of doubt is an opportunity for growth, and the rewards of walking in alignment with our soul's calling are beyond what we can imagine. If you're feeling lost, disconnected, or unsure of your path, know that you are not alone. The voice of your soul is calling you too. Just like Mark, you have the power to embrace your divine purpose. You have the power to trust the process, to step into your role as a chosen one, and to make the impact you were always meant to make. The time to listen to the voice within you is now. The time to step into your divine purpose is now. If you're ready to take the next step in your own journey, like this video and subscribe. Stay tuned for more stories of empowerment and transformation. You are on the path to greatness, chosen one. The journey is just beginning.